Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. Charles Hammaker here, joined by Bel Garcia. Just want to say I am proud of Bel for taking on
Aw.
more of a role. We've got her on Storm game days by herself now, Mariners, as well as her own Twitter, which we will have to update that here, her little thing
Yes.
here in a little bit, so that with these games that she's at when I may be at a different game, you can follow along as well, always retweeting and pushing her stuff along so you can stay up to date on those as well. But man, it's when did you join the show? Was it
I think it was the beginning of the year.
yeah, we're getting old, huh, Salman? Terrible. My memory's going. So, with that being said, we'll continue here and get into. I mean, there's some Seahawks news. It's more sort of more some
Weekends.
stuff that I want some opinions on and some thoughts on. So let's get right
Okay.
into that. What do we got going on?
Yeah. So for May 19th here, we have a bit of a rumor. Quarterback Geno Smith reportedly has the early edge over Drew Lock due to familiarity. I know that this is actually funny because this is something that we had received a comment about before. So what just kind of looking for your thoughts here. Like it doesn't surprise me completely, just maybe as a warm up until Drew Lock gets in the groove of things. But what do you think?
Well, I think you're completely right. With the early goings, I believe OTA started today, or they will start
Mm-hmm.
today. So yeah, I mean, with the report coming out that it's a familiarity thing, yeah, the early on that makes sense, right? But just from what I've gathered from Drew Lock's time in Denver, and just overall, I mean, if you look at it on paper, right, just age, uh, you know. Um, his arm strength,
Mm-hmm.
and just a little bit of mobility compared to what Geno's got. And again, if Geno comes out and wins a starting job outright, I'm not gonna, it's there's a reason there's a quarterback competition,
Yeah.
right? But for the stage that we're at, I think that initial report makes sense.
Okay. And just more quarterback news here. The team has waived QB Levi Lewis. So he was an undrafted free agent. Quarterback room after Lewis was waived is now Drew Lock, Geno Smith, and Jacob Eason. Um, and like we said, it likely Geno will start, and it'll be interesting if they ever do make that transition during the season to Drew Lock or when they decide to.
I have
So,
to figure both guys play some amount of games together. I don't think it's just
okay.
going to be one guy the whole way.
Yeah.
But then I want to ask you, with that quarterback room that compared to what we've had is not necessarily ideal. Do you think they add to that? I know that again, obviously, the idea of a Baker Mayfield has kind of lingered around, has kind of been around here. There was an
Yeah.
Instagram post by his wife
I
where,
saw that.
yeah. So I mean, do you think they add to that room, or is it just kind of this is? It is again. I would have. I was. We've talked about it here before. I've looked at not a Levi Lewis, a Malik Willis,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we've thought about stuff like that. Even at the very beginning, when Russell was traded, it was like, oh, maybe bring in a Cam Newton because of his
Yeah.
mobility and all that kind of thing, and because he's a veteran. But it just seems like, as I've said since the draft, it just seems like they're staying put with what they've got because they believe in what they have.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is any possibility, even if small, that they add to that quarterback room?
I don't. And just with the whole Baker Mayfield thing, because previously they didn't really show interest, I think these are the guys that they move forward with, and this is what we have to work with. I'm also not familiar with them seeking or being interested in anybody else. Have you heard any
No,
names thrown out there?
because
Okay.
it's I know that at a time they weren't interested in Baker Mayfield, after previously being interested, and then now it's, I think Cleveland's asking for too much.
Hmm.
And again,
Yeah.
if you've got, well, that's the thing that plays into it, and we'll get to it in legal news about Deshaun Watson, right? How long is he going to be out? Because you have to figure he's going
Oh,
to be out at
right.
least a little bit, which that's our own thing that we could talk about on its own, pardon me, but I think he's still got some value to them. So charging a whole lot doesn't necessarily make sense when it's like, hey, you might already keep him anyway.
Hmm.
Why would, so I don't know. I guess you can play it into, oh, he might be a starter for us still.
That
But
hadn't actually crossed my mind, surprisingly. So, yeah, that's true.
it's an interesting angle. But at the end of the day, like when we reach week 1 of preseason, I think we're going to be looking at the same quarterback room. Maybe bring in a couple
Interesting.
veterans to just and maybe a veteran or two. I know last year they brought in Sean Mannion at some point to like kind of work it in, but he didn't. I don't think he stuck.
Yeah.
So I don't think so. No, I think they stick with what they've got.
Moving forward here, on May 23rd, the team signs wide receiver Marquise Goodwin to a 1-year deal.
Now I want to get your interest on this. This happened. The contract details of this haven't been released, like money wise. It's just a 1 year, according to Spot Track.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Okay,
Mhm.
it's just for this year, right? We won't look past this year in terms of contracts and all that. For this year, does this tell you anything about Dee Eskridge? Because he got drafted in a place where some people thought he might have been a reach. He's already a little bit older than the standard draft pick, right? I think he's like 23, 24 now. And this is like what, second year in the league. And he just hasn't been able, even when he was healthy, he wasn't seeing those immediate third wide receiver snaps. And he just has not been able, at least after a year, right? You know, you can't judge everything off of 1 year. But am I reaching and asking if this is any sort of indication
No.
on
I mean,
Eskridge, or you think this is, hey,
definitely not a reach.
we need someone to push you. We need a guy like Goodwin, who's a speedy guy. He's always been a wide receiver, kick returner sort of guy. I think he spent last year with the 49ers. No, pardon me, with the Bears the 3 years before that, the 49ers. But I don't know, right? Because again, if you're not producing, why don't I bring in someone to push you a little bit to give you some competition? Because you've
Yeah.
got Freddie Swain below you. You know, they drafted a couple guys, Derek Young, Bo Melton.
Mhm.
But I think that speaks a little bit as to what they see from Eskridge.
It definitely does. I think just with all the guys that they do have in that position, and like you said, bringing in a veteran that can maybe take your spot in a sense is going to motivate you to improve or do better. So it'll be interesting to see what moves they make from here.
Yep. I mean, it's now or never, and
Yep.
it's interesting to see how he'll react to that. I'm sure. Well, not necessarily now or never, but it's obviously to use something that was just talked to us about before. It was a proving ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've got to prove yourself, and you've got to earn that contract. And hey, maybe it's like, we got to figure out what we want to do here. So no, I saw that signing. I was like, what's Dee Eskridge doing? You know, because unless you plan on using a lot of 4 receiver sets, which that's not necessarily a Pete Carroll thing to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. But was interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Moving forward onto some league news here. On May 16th, Kyler Murray may get a Derek Carr-like deal. We know that Kyler's been fighting for an extension here, and he wasn't really happy starting the season without a contract extension. So sounds like he's reportedly seeking an extension a little higher than Derek Carr's 3-year, $121.5 million deal per league executives. Now, as a Cardinals, do you see yourself moving on from a Kyler Murray?
If I'm in the GM chair, I don't think I can afford to.
Right.
Because for the longest time, I mean, you had Carson Palmer for a few years, and that was fine with them. You had Josh Rosen, who you took high, and he didn't turn out. And then you bring in Kyler Murray right after that. And then before then, it was a carousel of guys. I know Kevin Kolb was in there. There were some other names. But overall, the Cardinals, just like kind of how we're in the situation at this moment, franchise quarterbacks are not easy to stumble upon.
Right.
And usually the teams that go deep in the playoffs have one of those. You know, you look at, I mean, the Vikings a few years ago when they had the Minneapolis Miracle, that's a different story because there was a lot of talent on that team. And obviously they didn't go that far. Well, I mean, they lost to the Eagles. And granted, the Eagles were able to pull it out, but Nick Foles was playing at a level higher than he normally does.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So with talking about that and franchise quarterbacks, I don't think they can afford to.
Right.
Because it's like, hey, then we go searching again. And you've got
Exactly.
DeAndre Hopkins, you've got now Marquise Hollywood Brown,
Mm-hmm.
you've got Zach Ertz, you've got the guys on that line, you've got that defense. You can't really, you've got too much invested in it, I think, to go into a sort of rebuild and worry about searching for a new quarterback. So I think you have to just deal with it and pay up.
And they did start off hot last season, so I don't see why you would not see what he can bring you in the future.
And it's just about, I mean, there's a coaching moments, right? It's like, obviously, these are things that you want to adjust from. So, yeah, I think if you're Arizona, you have to just deal with it.
Yeah. So, of course, we'll report once we do find more information on Kyler Murray's contract and how that extension went. On the 17th, there are new changes coming to Monday Night Football. There are reportedly triple headers coming to the primetime broadcast, along with flex scheduling for later in the season, and that would be starting in 2023. How do you feel about a triple header? Would you sit there and watch a triple header?
On a Monday, it feels like a lot.
Yeah.
The double header's already like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, there's another 3 hours I have to sit through. So 9 hours on top, you add commercials and stuff, and just a lot. And I mean, if
Yeah.
my team's not really playing, and if it's earlier in the season, I know it said flex scheduling later in the season, but like week 1, week 2, when they've already got the double headers for Monday night, because things are so
Yeah.
much different even 4-6 weeks later, in terms of like standings and how teams are playing. So I don't know. I just feel like with a lot of these primetime matchups, a lot of these not services, but broadcasting sort of platforms, it feels like they're trying to do too much. It's nice to see the Monday Night Football crew revamped
Yeah.
because for a bit it hasn't been as good as it has been.
Mhm.
But on a triple header, it just seems like you're doing too much.
I think that the double headers, and because you would assume that they would put it probably before, right? There's no way you add it after and then have it go later.
Yeah, I would have to
So
think before. So that's even earlier in the
yeah,
day,
yeah.
depending on where you're at and time zone. So I don't know. That just seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like, for me anyway, I don't think viewership would be very high for that first game. So we'll see how that plays out and if they go through. Oh, it looks like they have already, right? Is that like final decision?
Pretty sure.
Okay. Well, we'll see what viewership is like then. Also on the 17th, we have some Deshaun Watson news. He did have to meet with the NFL in regard to a situation. It looks like they're deadlocked to delay Watson trials. So all trial proceedings regarding the 22 women and the Browns quarterback are now expected to be pushed back to 2023. Attorneys have not been able to come to an agreement on which suit would be heard first between two plaintiffs. Now, we did hear some news from Watson in regard to one of those encounters where he openly admitted that one of the women left crying after the session. So don't see that going well. It's being pushed kind of late. I feel like I would be angry to see this news.
Well, I mean, just the issues about who's going first. That's just, and not being able to come to an agreement on, between, I don't know. I just feel like you have to get things going. And obviously, with that being pushed back, it allows him to play. You'd have to assume, depending on the NFL's investigation. I know that the next thing is that he has to meet with the NFL again.
Mhm.
It's just a situation where it just seems like there's a lot of red tape, I guess, to go through. And I would rather have this dealt with sooner rather than later.
Yeah. As an organization, I still don't kind of understand how you would willingly take all this on. But just like you said, Watson may need to meet with the NFL again. He might have to sit for another day of questions as multiple accusers are set to go on national television. So more as more information comes. On the 18th, the NFL and the Bills made big donations in wake of the recent mass shootings in Buffalo. The Bills and the NFL Foundation have each donated $200K to support response efforts. So, way to go! You would think that more people would kind of stand behind that and also make donations, but something's better than nothing for sure.
Yeah, and the Bills fan base has been pretty good about charity work and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them match something like that and do their own thing in addition to what the NFL and the Bills are doing.
Yeah. Moving forward here on the 19th, Greg Olsen will be part of the Super Bowl call. Former NFL and the Seahawks tight end will reportedly join Kevin Burkhardt in the Fox booth next February. And then on the 21st, Dan Schneider might finally be in trouble with the NFL. There is reportedly growing frustration with Commanders owner Dan Schneider that has other NFL owners counting votes to potentially force the team's sale. Not good news.
No, Snyder's been, for lack of a better word, a scumbag, for the entirety of the time that he's been the owner of the Commanders. And to see that maybe there's finally some movement in relation to getting him out. I know that, the news about this is that finally the allegations are catching up. The other owners are all right. This seemed like the other owners seem to be like, all right, this is too much. There's too much around you. People are calling on us. There's just been too much with you. it's time to get him out. And I don't know why it's taken this long. I mean, I've followed this sort of information relating to Snyder for years. And so finally, the idea that they might be moving towards getting rid of him, I think it's just overdue.
Yeah, agreed. I think that it needs to be done, and hopefully that's soon. Looking ahead here, that pretty much wraps up our NFL segment. What we have moving forward is in late July, and that would be NFL training camp.